Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in to E-Comm Elevated. I'm your host, Pete from Soapbox. We made this show for listeners like you who are looking to grow, build, and succeed in the e-commerce industry. However, this landscape is consistently changing, with new players, ideas, and business models being introduced daily, which honestly, at times, can just be a lot to manage. That's why we sit down with industry leaders to discuss their tips for success, reveal their secrets of the trade, and so much more, which you can use to elevate your business above the competition. Welcome, and I really hope you enjoy the show. When you get a good idea for a new product or service, what's the first thing that you do? You do your research, right? You look for comparables to try and gauge to see what the true value of your idea will bring. Then you move on to R&D, manufacturing, sales, and marketing. But there's one area that tends to be overlooked in this process quite often, and that's analytics. But it plays an enormous part on whether a business is going to be successful or not. Without a good analytics platform, how can you tell if your marketing is targeting the right audiences, or even if the prices you set will support your day-to-day operations? Our next guest is going to walk us through some ideas that we need to keep in mind when we are thinking about bringing new products to market, or we're just looking for additional avenues in which to increase our revenues. Please welcome the co-founder and COO of Trust, Daniel Drugger. Welcome, Daniel. Excited to have you here. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. Really excited to be here, Pete.
Definitely. Where are you joining us from today?
So I'm based in Los Angeles, and fortunately, it's nice and sunny down here, and most of our team is based out here as well.
Oh, that's always nice being in LA, right next to the beach. Can't complain, right?
That's right.
Well, before we get started with Trust, I really want to talk about your origin story a little bit, right? How Trust came to be. And I remember you telling me that before Trust, you actually worked at Snapchat, correct?
Yes, that's right. Myself and 4 co-founders, we all worked at Snap for a number of years prior to starting Trust.
Nice. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience there and, how this actually rolled into becoming Trust really after all of this?
Yeah. So really it started, in, I believe it was 2015, early 2016, where we all joined kind of independently, but really to help Snapchat build kind of its next iteration of its ads business. At the time, it was selling based on insertion orders, looked very much like a traditional media business.
Mm-hmm.
So a Condé Nast or an NBC. But really, the idea was they wanted to transform and look much more like a Google or a Facebook, with a dynamic auction, being able to service, tens of millions of customers and advertisers, and really support the full kind of funnel from awareness to conversion.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we got there, it was really built around that idea of, can we build a sustainable auction,
Mm-hmm.
one that made it easy for advertisers of all sizes to buy ads, target the right audiences, try different creatives, and effectively measure their campaigns. We did that for about 3 years, and saw a lot of success, got a lot of positive feedback. But while we were there, one of the challenging points that we saw was that direct-to-consumer brands, what we classified as mid-market brands, mobile app advertisers, kind of this middle class of advertisers and businesses were often overlooked.
Mm-hmm.
These are businesses doing tens of millions of dollars, and in some cases over $100 million. But they still didn't add up to what the Gaps or the Amazons or the Netflixes of the world were spending.
Mm-hmm.
And so what that meant was these brands didn't get access to the same level of data. These brands did not get access to the same level of support, whether that be creative support, data support, measurement support, and they didn't get access to the same financial benefits that the largest brands got access to. And the financial benefits were lines of credit, being able to better manage cash flow
Mm-hmm.
as you purchase ads on the platform. And so as we were looking at our next kind of adventure past Trust, we kept coming back to, this was a major problem that was never fully addressed and solved. And we heard that across the ecosystem, so not isolated to Snap, but with Facebook, with Pinterest, with Twitter, with other vendors, that these brands were having similar issues. And so we wanted to really build a platform and address these problems and help kind of these modern builders, build stronger businesses.
And that makes perfect sense, right? E-commerce has really exploded over the last couple of years. And I mean, it's not going to be a $10 million business overnight, right? These are mom and pop shops that are just getting started, and they really need the same type of, if not more attention than some of these bigger corporations. How can trust change the way that, they view analytics?
Yeah. And I think that one thing with analytics that's often kind of misrepresented, kind of maybe in the press or as people kind of understand it, is that it has to be this really robust tool that data analysts have to be in, data scientists, that you need a big team of engineers, that you need a data warehouse and to use Amazon data products. When really that's reserved for the few. Right?
Yeah.
That is reserved for big companies with really complex data systems with a lot of resources, and often built on legacy products that require them to do a lot of manual engineering to bring data from a ton of different sources.
Yeah.
Something that particularly e-commerce brands, I think, often overlook is that they've built their brands on online tools. Mm-hmm. They have a shop on Shopify. They use Stripe to process payments. They use QuickBooks Online to do accounting. They advertise completely on digital channels, and they bank entirely online.
Yeah.
And so, from that alone, all of this data exists in a structured way already, right? Data structuring is part of the challenges for big companies, that you need to normalize it and feed it into a system that can replicate it over time. That problem's already been solved. Shopify normalizes your customer data. Your banking infrastructure is set by Chase.
Yeah.
QuickBooks, you do some upfront work, but it is structured in there. Facebook and Twitter and Pinterest, they all largely use the same data structure.
Yeah.
And so, you don't need a lot of data to get some benefit. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where a lot of companies, particularly e-commerce or earlier stage, get hung up, is they think it has to be this really complex solution. Yeah. When in reality, just doing a little can go a long way, particularly at those early stages.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the first piece, is really getting over the hump of you're not ready for data, or you don't have the right resources or tools to even try it.
Yeah.
Because that's not the case anymore.
And truthfully, I mean, really, data points and connections come in all shapes and sizes, right? But there's one that we use every single day. And, it's even more important when you look at the professional industry, and that's networking, right? And, how and why is networking so important when it comes to a business?
Yeah. I mean, networking is fascinating because, like you said, it is a data point. And again, people often think that it's purely qualitative. You're dealing with people. It's not quantifiable. You're not dealing with numbers. When in reality, you can start to exchange numbers with a lot of folks in your network.
Yeah.
And it's so important because you can get new perspectives for ideas, new perspectives on how to run your business, maybe new ideas to how better can you operate your business, or new vendors to try. But I think one thing we've seen, with a lot of the companies on Trust, is these founders have very small groups that are highly trusted networks of theirs, of similar DTC founders, where they trade very intimate information about margin profiles, about how much they're paying for different services, what are they paying to acquire a customer, geographies of where they're getting customers. And what we find is really what it comes down to is they're looking to get a gut check of how are they performing. Are they performing at a level on par or above or below relative to the space? Mm-hmm. And they're going to a small group of 5 to 10 trusted founders in their network to get that information. Yeah. When in reality, like we talked about, that data exists already.
Yep.
And so there is a better way to do that. Obviously, you need to make a trusted larger network, but functionally there is a better way to do that.
Yeah. And the hard part, I think, when it comes to networking is finding those like-minded individuals like yourself, in the same space. What are a couple different ways that you continue to network, as the COO of Trust? Like, how do you continue to grow your network?
Yeah, I think, one way I do that is by approaching every call, whether it's a sales call, business development call, an introduction through a friend or a friend of a friend. Approaching every one of those calls is just an opportunity to learn from someone new, without a hard agenda, without it being a transaction. That's where some of my closest relationships have come from, is being introduced through two other people because they think we might have an interesting conversation, or they think our businesses might be able to do something together. And I think that's one that often gets overlooked. And the other, I think, is particularly for e-commerce founders, and we're a startup, and so folks in our shoes, is that founders want to help other founders.
Definitely.
Nobody wants to see another company fail. Even if you're in the same space and competing, competition breeds kind of strength on both sides, and innovation. And so we've seen more often than not that just kind of talking to other founders, reaching out to other founders, people want to help. So they'll get on a call, they'll share information, they'll be forthcoming. And that's just the nature of kind of where we all are in this cycle. I think when you become a unicorn or a decacorn, that changes.
Mhm.
Maybe you do have to be a little more protective of your time, protective of your information. But when you're a 10, 50, $100 million business, you're still in a similar boat to companies in that range. So I think that's one that folks think that you do $100 million, they won't want to talk to me. I think cold emails are something that we should be using more often than not.
Yes.
Especially if we've got a lot of commonality.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to networking, a lot of entrepreneurs, I think we just get in ourselves, right? We are so focused in our own businesses and growing our own brands that we really, forget that there's people out there who have been doing this for years, right? They've walked other brands out there and are willing to help. It's crazy how much CEOs, COOs, CFOs, I mean, these guys that have really very little time are willing to help, new entrepreneurs, new businesses that are really looking to grow. And that's huge. We definitely need to take better advantage of our networking nowadays more than ever. And just like storing and organizing contacts in your phone is important, like tracking the same type of information and data for your business is also important, right? What are a couple types of data should a brand keep or not keep?
Yeah. And kind of going back to, where maybe it was a decision that had to be made when storage was expensive and the engineering, you were dealing with competing priorities. I think today, like I said, the data is structured, the data is already stored somewhere on a service you are likely already paying for, like Shopify, like Facebook. And so I don't think the question anymore is, what data should we be keeping or not keeping? Mm-hmm. It really is, starting from the other end, what's the outcome I want to achieve? Mm-hmm. And what data do I need to achieve that? And so, a few use cases and a few things that we talk to our founders about is, one, almost every founder wants to decrease the cost of a customer acquisition.
Yes.
And so really that is understanding then how much are you paying, right? From a base level, what are you paying on Facebook? What are you paying on Google? What are you paying on other channels that you're acquiring customers from? And that's one side of it, one side of the coin. The other side is, how does that compare to the market, right? Yeah. It's great in isolation to say, I want to reduce my CAC. But it's really hard to say that if you don't know whether you are outperforming, underperforming, on the margin. And so if you're already better than 90% of the industry, to reduce your CAC is going to be really, really difficult. Mm-hmm. And so you may want to start looking at other problems. And so I think, the data we want to keep or use, it really has to begin with, what's the outcome I want to achieve? What is the goal that I'm setting out to do? And that can be reducing CAC, that can be increasing retention. It can be, more financial. It can be getting a loan or getting venture financing or getting an investor. Can be reducing OpEx. So there's a number of things that brands should be looking to achieve. And I think from there, then they can look at what data to use and how to utilize it in the best way.
Yeah. And I think you touched on this a couple of times. There's right now, anywhere you go, any storefront you touch, any social media platform you're using, it tracks its own data. I think the most important part right now is rating and, interpreting the data, right? Man, I can tell you, I have gone cross-eyed for days just looking at all the data points, the multiple different platforms that you have to look at, and just really trying to figure out, the quickest and best ways my business can benefit from it. Right. And you talked about doing the marketing. That's one aspect of this is, being able to target the right audience, making sure you're setting the right prices. But with every dollar made, there's a dollar spent, right? And that's one big area that I think the analytics is people are missing out on, is how to reduce the expenses. It's not just about bringing all these people in. It's about being as profitable and as efficient as you can, right? So how has this helped you or other businesses really, reduce the other side of the coin?
Yeah, I think that's entirely right. Is that kind of there is the OpEx piece of it. There is the cost side of it, right? Everyone wants to look at revenue and have that revenue go up and to the right, and that's what we should be doing because that is, theoretically infinite. Whereas cost, there is a floor, but costs can get away from a business. And so I think from an analytics standpoint, understanding your bank data, understanding your accounting data, and then the relationship with your revenue data. So customer purchases, AOV, returns, retention rate, really can give business owners an idea of kind of what does a real cost structure look like, right? There's the easy ones on, what do I spend on my Shopify subscription every month? What do I spend on these vendors every month? And then there are variable costs. And so I think, business owners, especially today, as we're seeing this market take some pretty substantial shifts, it's going to become much more important for business owners to have a strong grasp of what their cost structure looks like, how that cost structure evolves over time, and really managing that, right? Making sure that they're spending in the right ways, that it's additive to the business, and that, that they're spending time on some regularity, kind of building that in, right? I think, some businesses do it annually, some will just do it ad hoc, but really setting up a time with deliberate kind of effort and a deliberate goal of understanding the cost structure, understanding costs, and bringing that down every time is something that we certainly recommend to a lot of the businesses on Trust. We hear more and more, especially in this market. And I think that the data's there, right? So at Trust, we integrate your QuickBooks, we integrate your bank data, we integrate some of those other sources and try to provide a top line of, what do your trends look like? How does cash flow change month to month? And then what do you look like relative to the market? And so, we're not trying to tell you where to cut costs or to make, try to generate more revenue, but we do want to help you understand maybe some areas of your business that you should be looking deeper into. And so I think that's where it starts is use the data to identify some areas of opportunity and then build a cadence, build that muscle to really come back and evaluate cost structure.
I really like how you said that, is how you're building muscle memory, right? When it comes to analytics. Analytics is something that's going to be tough for everybody to start off with, right? It's really something you have to really get used to looking at. And like you're saying before, it's about building that cadence, couple months here, couple months there, and then, coming around and looking at all of, all the data points and building the right game plan for your business itself. But I think more importantly than that is being able to just get a snapshot right there at that second of how your actual brand is doing. I think that is huge. And it's very big compared to where it was before. Back in the day, it'd take 3 months of, people at whole accounting department to pull all of these expenses and pull all these market trends. And you would sit down for, a week with, all the higher ups and get all this information literally downloaded to you by someone else. Now you can click on a button. It pulls up an amazing, very easy to read platform on your website. It's awesome. So it's really important. I think it's probably one of the biggest things that entrepreneurs really miss out on right now is this analytics. It's from the start. It is not after. You got to do it from the start.
Yes.
And it's huge. It's probably one of the biggest, returns on the investments, because it's not a lot of money to invest in a good analytics platform, but it does make a lot of money in the back end.
Yeah.
Yep. If our conversation so far today has not convinced our listeners to look into a good analytics platform, who or where can they reach out to get some additional information?
Yeah. I mean, of course, I'm a little biased. I think, folks should take a look at Trust. There's a lot of good players out there, depending on what, what the business is looking for. But I think, aside from choosing the right vendor or partner, I think it's really understanding kind of what is the founder or the team's level of sophistication. I think it is starting with, yes, you want analytics, but why do you want analytics, right? Do you want it for the sake of analytics? Because that's probably not going to be a great outcome. Or do you have some real goals? I think analytics for, a single business is great, right? It gives you, as you said, a high level snapshot of your own business, but it doesn't help you take action really. So that's where I think, businesses should start to look at analytics and ask the question of, can I get benchmarks? Can I get comparisons and comparative data? I want to understand my analytics in context of the market or in context of kind of a peer set. And then kind of a later stage is, now that I have the analytics and I know what I want to achieve, how can I do this? Can I do this with the tool that I'm using, or do I need to go find another tool? But because I have the analytics, I know that there's a segment of customers, as an example, that I want to retarget on Facebook. Can I do that from this platform in a safe and privacy, effective way? If I want to go get a loan, I have the data. I understand what my cash flow looks like. I understand what my cash balance looks like. Can I go do that with the data from this analytics platform? Or do I need to either manually do this or use another third party? And so I think businesses need to be honest with themselves where they are on that spectrum.
Yeah.
Are they at the very first stage of, all I want is a quick snapshot of my business to just start to build that muscle? And then, or am I at a phase or at a stage where I want to and can understand my business in the context of other businesses? And then later on, it's, now that I understand all my analytics, am I ready to take action? Do I know what I need to do based on the data that I've looked at and what I've analyzed and the conclusions I've made? And I think that's going to be really the differing factor for various owners and founders is, where are they on that spectrum? And that's kind of how we're approaching it. We want to help people kind of at all phases, take them through either that education process or directly to the action process based on where they are in their business. But I think that's an important question, an important exercise I think every founder needs to go through.
Definitely. And that's huge. You definitely need to know where you're going and where you want to end up. And if you don't, right, you're just going to really go in circles.
That's right. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I mean, everything you've discussed today is really important. And I think a lot of our listeners needed to hear this. Do you have any final thoughts for our listeners, or any advice for new entrepreneurs out there?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's, don't be shy of the work, right? I think, sometimes whether it's a kind of a nighttime job, right? A side job from a full-time corporate, role or something, or it's the full-time job. I think, often we can get kind of overwhelmed with the amount of work or the amount of things that we have to do. And so I think let's not be scared of that. Let's tackle, these tasks one by one. One task begets more progress. And I think that's really, something I talk to a lot of founders about. We kind of share notes, and that's something that I think I've seen the best founders kind of really embody, is just embracing that work, tackling it one by one, and just making progress over time, right? Not just trying to get from A to Z, but really going through every letter of the alphabet and doing that work.
Definitely. And, Daniel's not the only one that said this. It's going to take a lot of hard work to get a successful business. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs need to listen to this too and hear this out. It may not be the first business that makes it all the way and that's successful. And that's okay. As long as we learn from that, right? And like you said before, it's one step at a time, one day at a time, just one task at a time. Just keep moving forward, or little by little. Thank you so much again for joining us today, Daniel. I really, it's been an absolute pleasure having you with us. And, we hope to see you on E-Comm Elevated a little bit later in the future too.
forward to it. And yeah, thank you for the time.
You're
We
welcome.
had a lot of fun.
You have a great day.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks again for listening. We hope you'll use some of the insights provided on today's show to elevate your own business's success. As always, listen and subscribe to E-Comm Elevated or follow our Soapbox social media for more amazing advice. I've been your host, Pete from Soapbox. Have a great week, and we'll see you in the next episode of E-Comm Elevated.